Good morning. Can we get started? Welcome to the May meeting of the Metro North Long Island Committee. And we have one public speaker this morning, Mr. Bowden. Join us at the podium.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In no particular order. By the way, I was hiking in Switzerland 2 weeks ago. To get to Solio, where we were hiking in the Bragalia Valley, I took 3 trains and 2 buses. Coming back, we use buses every day. Coming back, we had 2 buses and 5 trains because I had to stay overnight. In no particular order. How come I don't see any laptops in front of the board members? If, in fact, this is the 21st century, almost every one of you should have a laptop in front of you. That's how business is done today. And we see there was a new member going to be appointed to the board, and then in researching it, I see that most of you are holdovers and not actually appointed board members. And I suggest that any of you board members who are holdovers resign from the board in the next 30 days or get reappointed, because you're not free to act independently if your appointment is hanging in the air at the whim of somebody. And this board has become too important to have holdovers on it. So all of you who are holdovers, please resign. Let some younger people come here. Unless you belong here, then get yourself reappointed. In Switzerland, not only were the trains on time, they don't blow the train horns, and they don't have high-level stations. The culture of around here is we can't address the issue of why we still blow the train horns. In Hartsdale this morning, it was appropriate 100 years ago. Everybody's got these things in their ear, half the people are listening to the radio, and you're blowing a horn? And until you can address that kind of issue, you can't go forward. This is the 21st century, guys. If you don't get appointed to the board, get off. If you haven't got a laptop in front of you, get out. You don't have to actually use the laptop. Nobody knows if you're using it or not. Fake it! Cheat! Just open it up in front of you because you're sending a message to these people out here. We're not involved with the 21st century. Why should you be? If we can't deal with emails, and we can't deal with stuff on the internet, and we can't deal with our papers on the laptop, why should you people be required to do it? So there's a whole big cultural change going on here, and it starts with the board. And I apologize, Howard, I was after you. I should have been after the board all this time. My apologies. Because if the board can't set the right example, these people aren't going to follow it. So the board is at fault. Either get reappointed in 30 days or get off the board. And don't come from Westchester. Take the train here. Don't have your chauffeur drop you off in front of the place and then forget to go. He's parked in a bus lane. And the cop's got to go out and ask him to move. If you're on the railroad committee and there's a train that comes here, take it. If you haven't got enough brains to get out of your car, you don't belong on this board. And this is all about culture. Because if they don't set the right example, you're not going to follow the right example. We've been using freight trains. We've been taking these trailers and put them on freight cars. And it said to me, why don't we just take the trailers and put them on rails with those little bitty wheels that your Metro North trucks use when they ride around, with little donkey engines pulling them, instead of this whole big freight train that was designed 100 years ago to pull 100 trains together. So I'm looking for some help. If anybody has any help about helping me redesign freight trains and getting the trailers off the road, please contact me. I'm not hard to find.
I think we've
Yeah, I'm a little over time.
Just a little.
I know. So you're going to arrest me again? The last time I got arrested by the MTA, the judge finally, when I got there, he said, Mr. Bowden, we like what you're doing. Continue doing it. So in fact, if I break the rules here, I'm doing it at the direction of the court, which is what the last time the MTA arrested me. So I'm acting under the directions of the judge. You want to arrest me again? Handcuff me, perp walk me through Grand Central. I've done it once. It was the funniest thing that I've happened, and there's something to talk about for the rest of my life. And I want to thank you for arresting me.
Thank you very much. Approval of the minutes of April 21st. Are there any changes or comments on the minutes? If not, a motion to approve would be in order. Second, all in favor? Are there any changes to the work plan? I do not believe so. Okay. We're on to Long Island Railroad. Helena.
Okay, good morning, members of the Long Island Railroad Committee. I would like to just take a few minutes to provide some information on the Amtrak derailment that significantly affected the Long Island Railroad's AM and PM rush hour service during the week of May 9th. And I'd like to update you on the meetings we've had with Amtrak and the progress we are making with Amtrak's short-term and long-term plans to improve the conditions in the tunnels and to protect the safety and reliability of Long Island Railroad service for our customers as well as Amtrak and New Jersey Transit customers. You know, as many of you have read from the media reports, on Sunday afternoon, May 8th, an Amtrak train heading east in one of the 4 East River tunnels, Line 3, derailed approximately 1,200 feet into the tunnel in the vicinity of First Avenue, and it was a result of a broken rail. The Amtrak train, which had no passengers, was comprised of a locomotive and 5 coaches. 4 of the coaches derailed in the tunnel, causing extensive damage to approximately 1,200 feet of track. There was, an extensive re-railing effort performed by Amtrak crews with the assistance of Long Island Railroad and Metro North rec crews, and it took until late Monday afternoon for the re-railing to be completed and the equipment removed from the tunnels. I would like to thank Howard Permit. We have just great response from Metro North. They sent a crew and equipment. Long Island Railroad's crew and equipment as well did a great job of assisting. Needless to say, this incident had a significant impact on service Monday through Thursday, with service restored Friday morning. There was an average of 17% of our trains, AM and PM, that needed to be reduced so that we could offer rush hour service. We worked hard on customer communications. We tried to keep our customers informed. In fact, there were 291 customer email alerts issued to over 45,000 subscribers to this service. 302 tweets were sent out on Twitter. Approximately 100 website postings were made. We issued a revised schedule every day. We put out a press release, media contacts, just to ensure customers knew what train service would be provided and where. We'd like to thank New York City Transit, who assisted with westbound customers in the PM. They cross-honored fares, and we had customers exit at Jamaica to use the E-train rate at Jamaica Station. You know, first and foremost, I want to say we're extremely grateful that no one was hurt during the May 8th Amtrak derailment. And we're very appreciative of all the efforts made by Amtrak forces to repair the damage. Amtrak crews did replace 282 damaged ties, 600 cubic yards of stone ballast, approximately 120 feet of rail, 2 insulated joints, and 3 impedance bonds. And as many of you know, then there has to be testing as a result when the track is all reconstructed to make sure that everything was in working condition. During an inspection of the derailment site, that I made with our chief engineer at the Long Island Railroad, Bob Puzlowski. Bob and Ray Kenny, Senior VP of Operations, on Wednesday, May 11th. We walked through the area. We saw where the train had struck the bench wall. We observed the damaged ties that were being removed. We saw the destroyed impedance bonds. But most significantly, what we observed as the ballast had been removed, and I learned new terminology from Bob. Sorry, I'm really on allergy season here. The ballast had been removed, and while new ties had been put in, referred to as cribbed, and we walked from tie to tie, we did see significant accumulations of water, pooling water, and multiple clogged drains. It's our understanding that the water conditions in all 4 East River tunnels appear to be contributing to the infrastructure failures. And that, of course, posed safety issues and safety concerns. I met with Jay Walder, our CEO, that afternoon and briefed him in person on the incident and the conditions that I observed. He immediately contacted President of Amtrak, Joe Boardman, and talked about addressing the water conditions in the tunnel and ensuring that the tunnels are safe for our daily operation. Amtrak and Jay sent a letter. We sent a very thorough letter outlining what the incidents were, what our concerns were, and I believe all of you have received that letter. Amtrak responded on May 8th with a very thorough letter, a thorough response, and they put forth a very aggressive short-term and long-term tunnel remediation plan. I had the opportunity with Bob and Ray to meet with Amtrak's chief engineer and vice president of policy on Friday, and we reviewed the letter and we reviewed what their aggressive actions were to ensure that this critical infrastructure, this is, all of us in our operation understand how important the East River tunnels are and that we need to ensure the highest level of safety. They understand as well. They did put forth a very aggressive plan. We asked in a couple of places if they could take some action in the short term to immediately begin repairs and give us a plan in writing. They have agreed to that, and they've agreed to a long-term plan that really does a full track, including the rail rehabilitation. I want to report that Amtrak did a very good job this weekend. They, clearly are responding. They understand the issues of water pooling as well. They went in and did Line 4 this weekend. 162 feet of rail was replaced. 2 IJs were replaced. They did buffer rail, installed a new manhole box. 100 ties were replaced. With regard to drainage, they removed all the foul ballast. Our crews actually went in with our own equipment, a ballast regulator. After they replaced the ballast, we went in and smoothed it out because we have the equipment that is more adaptable to third rail. The drainage lines in all 4 tunnels were cleared. One thing I just want to point out, Pennsylvania Railroad, when they built the tunnels 100 years ago, they did an outstanding job of understanding tunnel drainage. Tunnels are going to get water. The key is to get the water out of the tunnel. They built very elaborate sump and sump pumps. The pumps have alarms on them, so we know when the pumps are working. The issue is ensuring that the drains are not clogged, that the water can get down into the sumps and be pumped out. We are very pleased with the aggressive response that Amtrak has. We are going to monitor their performance, monitor the short-term results, and meet with them for their long-term plan. Put a budget together, and we'll be presenting that to you as well. to ensure that we have long-term state of good repair for the tunnels. Let me just ask if there are any questions. I'd be, happy to answer those.
Questions regarding the Amtrak situation? Pat?
Yeah, Mitch, thanks. Helena, thank you for that comprehensive report. A couple of thoughts. One is, thankfully, no Amtrak or Long Island Railroad passengers or employees were hurt. Second is, I think we as a board and as a committee have to take a Missouri kind of show-me approach to this. And I would hope that you'd be reporting on a regular, perhaps a quarterly basis as to status. Because thirdly, it appears that the approach that Amtrak has taken over the years has been to be reactive and to react when problems occur. And given the derailments and other delays that have occurred this year, first night of Passover, St. Patrick's Day, the recent derailments, obviously customers' disruption on the Long Island Railroad as a result of the East River Tunnel situation has been substantial and has, I think, had an economic, social, and human cost which is not insignificant. Lastly, I think, fourth, we've got to look at whether the disconnect between ownership and maintenance and the fact that these tunnels are so critical to Long Island Railroad service, whether that disconnect between ownership and maintenance and who pays, et cetera, makes sense on a going forward basis. But I thank you for the report, and I'm hopeful that the progress you reported will continue.
Well, thank you very much, and I absolutely will report on a quarterly basis. We will be monitoring this on a monthly basis. If I in any way feel that the commitments that are made are not being met, we'll report even more frequently than quarterly. But this is very critical infrastructure. We recognize it. They recognize it. I do want to emphasize, they clearly understand the importance of the tunnels and that safety has to be maintained. Their response has been very good, very aggressive.
I think our concern is, Helena, as Pat clearly pointed out, that they only recognize the importance of the tunnels after we pointed out to them the importance of the tunnels. The tunnels are important and have been important to the Long Island Railroad for many years since Amtrak has owned them, and it's clear that they did not give the tunnels the priority they should have over the years, and only after a variety of events occurred and a variety of calls on this board's behalf and others in the political community for changes did Amtrak react. And I agree with Pat completely. They tend to be reactive rather than proactive. The question now is whether they're going to be proactive. And that we're just going to have to see what happens in that regard.
Right.
Ira?
Yeah. Just one last comment. I noticed for the report for April for major delays, there's a smoke condition in East River Tunnel that was April 1st. I mean, I assume that Amtrak's, we're not just looking at the track bed, but other problems that we've had historically in the East River tunnels and addressing them all. In other words, making sure that there's regular maintenance in the East River tunnels. Because when there was an incident, this was, I think, the Hall fire, I asked about regular maintenance, and I asked about Amtrak's maintenance East River tunnels, and the response was as needed. I assumed that after this situation, that's no longer the case, that there'll be regular maintenance intervals for all the infrastructure in the East River tunnels.
I'm going to look back at that smoke condition incident because I don't want to speak out of context,
Right.
but to the larger point you're making, absolutely, there has to be state of good repair maintenance, and we are looking to really monitor what they're doing, what are the incidents, and how do they contribute to the overall picture of safety in these tunnels.
I have one question about the shared agreement for the shared costs for the tunnel. How is that decided? In other words, how is that expelled out in the agreement? It was how do we pay? I mean, it's the Reader's Digest version of how how the Long Island Railroad pays for maintenance in the East River tunnels or even infrastructure improvements.
We go through a very elaborate process of auditing the bills they send us, and we will monitor, head count that they attribute to each work order. So we do have, an ongoing sense of what is the time and materials that they are using in each of the tunnels. We pay for the, annual maintenance costs at a percentage basis based on our use of the tunnels, and then we contribute to the capital program as well. We will go forward with a budget on this long-term maintenance, and I will share that with you. It all comes out of the joint services agreement.
Right, and that service agreement is based on usage, train usage, or is it more complicated?
It's all very complicated agreements. We actually have exclusive use of 2 out of the 4 tunnels. However, our use of the other 2 is greater than Amtrak's. So we are using all 4 tunnels. And then, of course, what happens is when a tunnel is out of service, for example, I want to share with you, this past weekend with line 4 out, then everyone that was using the tunnels used 1 through 3, regardless of the fact that that may be our exclusive use tunnel. And it all comes out of the joint services agreement. Very complicated, long-standing arrangements.
Okay, one last question. I understand the joint service agreement. It's 6 months Long Island Railroad has control of the operations and 6 months Amtrak's personnel. Is that's correct? Who was? Is that true, or is
That's
it?
actually a separate agreement, and that's involves Penn Station Central Control.
Right.
And that is the train dispatching out of Penn. And I do have to say that's a separate operation, a separate building, and is an extremely cooperative arrangement amongst the 3 railroads that do operate out of Penn. So regardless of whose 6 months it is, I would say that over time it has evolved in a very fair and equitable way.
Okay.
No one takes advantage of the fact it's their 6 months. Train movement gets done in a way that accommodates everybody.
Pat?
Sorry, Elena, one question on that. To the non-railroad person, that seems like an odd arrangement. Is that a sensible arrangement?
I think it is very sensible, and it allows, it has over time allowed the railroads to emerge in a joint venture arrangement where there's a forum to talk about any issues, there's protocols that are put in place, there's operating procedures that work for both railroads. It has worked very well.
Can I ask you a question? Not to belabor this, but so how does it work in terms of personnel? Or what do you do? The people that are there for the 6 months having to maintain it, and then when it gets, I don't know.
All 3 railroads are always there 12 months out of the year, and they each have a section that they sit at looking at a big board demonstrating where trains are moving. But the head supervisor alternates every 6 months between Long Island Railroad and Amtrak.
Oh, so that's the only...
That's the only thing. Their workers are still moving their trains. Right. No.
Switches, and I'm like,
It's only the...
Okay, so
quote,
it sounds
unquote,
less bizarre than it
Yes,
did
who's
a
in
minute ago.
charge.
Okay.
Right.
It still sounds somewhat bizarre, but less bizarre. Jim?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be carrying coals to Newcastle, but I think maybe for the public record it would be good to hear it. What this report on the tunnels does seem to point out is that we had a critical choke point in both from the standpoint of service and safety with these tunnels, which over time had been allowed to slip not necessarily the fault of this railroad and this agency, but nevertheless things had gotten away from us. And that's a long way around of saying, can you assure us that each of the railroads here represented do have a real prioritization of sections in their operation which really get very close control because so much depends on those things being operational at all times? That's the question.
Well, I'll speak with regard to, the East River tunnels. It is certainly infrastructure that we have, monitored very carefully with Amtrak over the past. My inspection of the derailment site, of course, now leads me to say we need to do more in terms of meeting with them. We will be doing that. We have other areas that are very critical in our infrastructure. Jamaica will be coming forward as part of our capital program with improvements we need to make at Jamaica as we modernize that infrastructure as well. So I would say both from a annual maintenance perspective and a capital program perspective, we are very conscious of these key points, critical junctures in our infrastructure that must be maintained not only for absolutely for safety, but for the volume and use that they get as well. Howard.
Yeah. Jim, similarly, we have the same situation. The critical parts for Metro-North, the most critical is from CP5 or MO in the Bronx, where the lines come together into Grand Central. So special attention is always paid to the Park Avenue Tunnel, to the interlocking there, and then up the line there are other critical locations as well. So we do spend extra attention on them. When we have storms, we will put people in certain places to protect those critical locations.
Thank you both for that, and I would only add that to the extent that we do have decisions to make over time, whether it's capital or otherwise, if they are communicated in that context, we'll absolutely be sure that gets the attention and the support that you need.
Anyone else on this issue? Okay. Status of operations, other than Amtrak.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The operating report starts on page number 17, and our goal for on-time performance overall is 95.1%. During the month of April, our total on-time performance was 95.9%. Our total peak on-time performance was 95.7%, with 97.1% for the AM peak and the PM peak ending at 94.2%. April's total off-peak on-time performance was 96%, with the weekday off-peak on-time performance finishing at 95.7%, and the weekend off-peak ending at 96.9%. During April, 99.3% of the peak trains met our seating standard, and 99.6% of scheduled trips were completed. 135 trains operated more than 15 minutes late. Our year-to-date on-time performance is, through April 30th is 94%, and the details on that are on page number 18. During the month of April, we had 6 100% rush hours, 4 in the morning and 2 in the PM rush. And year-to-date, there have been 19, 11 in the morning, and 8 during the PM rush. Our AM peak car availability was met each day in April, and the total fleet MDBF for March, note the 1 month lag, was 176,297 versus a goal of 150,000. Moving to safety, our numbers through the end of March, reportable employee accidents are up by 17%, customer accidents are up by 8%, and rail accidents were down by 1. And regarding major events, and Helena was talking about Amtrak, the most significant event for the month was caused by the track condition in Amtrak Line 3 on the first evening of Passover, which was Monday, April 18th. That resulted in a total of 124 late and canceled trains. Yes, sir.
Let me call your attention first to page 19. PM peak for Port Jeff. Down significantly. Indeed, the average delay per train for performance summary seems to be up for year-to-date down 13.5%. Do we have any explanation for that? Any plan to remedy that?
Yes, the overall, we have been addressing the overall on-time performance for the Port Jefferson branch. It is improved. We still have an issue with the PM peak. One of the issues, of course, I had mentioned was the restrictions on the branch. I should point out that these trains are counted by trains that originate and that are terminating on the Port Jefferson branch, but they do operate some all the way through to Penn Station. So we're watching that whole thing, and we're putting more resources on some particular trains.
The people who are on these trains don't really appreciate the statistics as much as you and I might.
That's
And
right.
It just seems to me that we ought to focus on it. Let me give you a couple
Which we
of
are.
others. You've got an incredible number of standees, page 23 on 24, on both the Huntington branch and the Long Beach branch. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, there is. On both cases, it's something that is programmed. We have not been able to, because of capacity limitations and infrastructure limitations, make it improved. Specifically on the Port Jefferson branch, we have a train late in the rush hour that has 10 cars, should really have 12, and that is really what's driving this number, that particular train. However, given the infrastructure at Huntington and our lack of ability to run extra train out there in that time frame, we can't build that train up.
So are you saying that the poor folk coming out of Huntington are doomed to this for a period of time?
On that one train, yes, sir.
Until such time as the town of Huntington allows the Long Island Railroad to build a new yard, which is absolutely essential, has been our capital program for many years, and has been unable to be built. And as I've told the supervisor of the town of Huntington on many occasions, many of these people on the train are his residents. We would be able to provide much better service if he would let us build the yard. The problem is we have not been able to build the yard in either Huntington or Smithtown, or to some extent in Brookhaven, and as a result of that, this is what necessitates. That's no excuse for not doing
All I
it.
wanted to do was smoke it out.
It's just the issue.
Now, the point I'm trying to follow up with, if I may, is that the people in the town of Huntington who have been standing have now got a place to which they may appropriately complain as the cause for their standing. Is that correct?
Well, that's obviously all of these issues are interrelated.
And would you just tell me Long Branch? Is that the same
Long
problem?
Beach?
Long Beach.
Long Beach?
Long Beach is it's a train. It's number 819. It runs in the heart of the rush hour, and it has several connections at Jamaica, which caused it to be overloaded at that point. Given the lack of slots at that particular time of morning, we have not been able to change that. We have not come up with a plan to either break a connection or and the train is already at 12 cars, so it can't go beyond that.
Is that, you mean the standees are west of Jamaica?
Yes.
Oh, so the standees are not east of Jamaica.
That's right.
That looked funny because Long Branch, I've been on Long Branch trains. They're not.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, so
Long
this
Beach.
standees between Jamaica and Penn.
Yes.
It's about what's the running? 15 minutes?
It's about 18 minutes.
18.
Between 18 and
All right.
21 minutes, depending on the train.
Just briefly on. It's the seems to be the crux of the problem is PM peak.
Yes.
Is that could that be because of the other problems that
Yes.
that,
Yes.
that their trains got hit harder because of the problems in April as opposed to everyone else's?
Well, not by way of an excuse, but there's fewer of them than on most branches, and they get hit in the same way the others do, so it's reflected as a lower percentage. There's also the inability to make up time, because of the conditions at Huntington and at the single track east of Huntington.
This is west. Right. No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Any other questions? Okay. Financial and ridership report.
Good morning. The financial report begins on page 29. I'll start with the memo that was circulated to the board members last week on ridership. April was, I would say, a disappointing month for the Long Island Railroad from the ridership perspective, despite the fact that the employment in the region continues to grow. The Long Island Railroad isn't seeing, there's a lag, appears to be a lag between that and commutation ridership. So for the month of April, we did carry 6.7 million customers, but that was 1.8% less than what we had carried in April of 2010. It is the first time in 3 months that we've seen ridership drop. Commutation was down 1.7%. Monthly ticket sales were down 1,600 or so. On the non-commutation side,
that was also down 2% compared to 2010. All of the ticket types on the non-commutation dropped, other than the 10-trip off-peak ticket. And getaways. The getaways are a positive side of what we're seeing. There continues to be tremendous interest in the Long Island Railroad getaway packages, particularly to Broadway shows and the Harry Potter exhibit. Year to date, where does this bring us? Year to date, our total ridership is down 1.7% compared to 2010. Commutation is down 1.9%, and non-commutation is down 1.3%, all versus 2010. I will note that we did, although it's in the month of May, I'll note we did, as you may know, reintroduce Belmont service on a limited basis between April 29th and May 16th. 17 dates service was offered again, and we did carry 3,652 passengers, and that generated about $23,000 in revenue. Moving to the budget report, which begins on page 40, I believe. Most of the, actually not page 40, sorry, page 32 is the table that contains most of the numbers I'll be referring to. Through March, the Long Island Railroad generated $177 million. That was $21 million less than budget. However, most of this is related to reimbursable activity that also was offset by less expense. So it's basically a wash to the budget. Of that $21 million, $16 million is that capital reimbursement and other reimbursement, mostly due to delays in PTC, positive train control activities, as well as East Side access work. On the fare revenue side, due to the ridership figures that I just discussed, we're about $2 million below budget on revenue. For expenses, through March, the Long Island Railroad has spent $433 million. That's $16 million favorable to the budget. Labor expenses are slightly above budget, about $3.4 million. On the straight time side, that's mostly due to the fact that there were less vacancies than we had anticipated at this time of the year. Sometimes it's difficult to project exactly when the vacancies will occur. And also, overtime spending was $4 million over budget year to date. However, that's almost entirely due to the 73,000 more hours that we had to dedicate to weather than anticipated due to the several major storms that I reported about last month. Non-labor is $14 million favorable to budget, mostly on the material side. And lastly, for our overall financial indicators, the year-to-date fare operating ratio is 43.9%. Excluding the pension liability, which is unfunded, that's 48.2%. Our cost per passenger was $16.13, and the revenue per passenger was $7.09. That concludes the financial report.
Charles?
Let me take you to page 45. There seems to be a continuing decline, as you noted, in commutation. To what extent, if any, has Long Island Railroad surveyed customers or done any kind of analysis to determine the reasons for that decline?
Well, we do an annual customer satisfaction survey, which covers a variety of topics, including what aspects of the operation are customers satisfied with, which do they need improvement. So that would be one area, one way to get that information. But also, I mean, you really can't underestimate the really significant impact that the job market has on Long Island Railroad's ridership. I mean, it basically
But that's sort of
overwhelms.
improved of late.
Yeah, it's true, and it's interesting that there is a slight lag. There is a slight lag compared to the growth in the employment sector. So it's something we're looking at. But I would say, from the customer perspective, most of our feedback comes from the satisfaction survey.
But the folk who would have taken the commutation package, in order to get to work, if it be outside their immediate area, are going to have to do it by car. They're going to clog up the Long Island Expressway and every other vehicle. It seems to me that we ought to be able to take a good hard look as to whether there's something we can do or something we're not doing in order to meet those needs. Is that possible?
And one of the things that I'm just going to jump in and say that we are monitoring very carefully the impact on the fare increase. You know, we try to predict what the elasticity of our market is when the fare goes up. You know, there's an assumption that the customer will continue to come back. I think we're still feeling some of the impact of customers who faced the last fare increase.
Yeah, but given the increases in the price of gasoline, it seems to me that they're facing a Hobson's choice here.
Right, and that's what we'll start to watch now. Will the price of gasoline make people come back? But we'll do some additional analysis on what are we feeling versus the Long Island economy and there is a growth in jobs. We've been reading about it. We've been hearing about it. And we should start to feel that in our ridership.
Okay. Let me ask you to turn to the second item you focused on and turn to page 33, the financials. Under the heading of overtime, there is a significant increase in overtime, which is attributed to primarily unfavorable vacancy-absentee coverage, partially offset by favorable weather. My question is, has any analysis at all been made as to the extent to which the layoffs have shifted costs into overtime? In other words, the laying off of personnel has caused an increase in overtime, and if the answer is yes, the second question would be, economically, are we better off with one course or another?
I would say, first of all, the workforce reduction you referred to that took place last year was primarily on the administrative side of the Long Island Railroad, where, and in many cases, overtime is not a factor. It's actually not earned. There were some cases where operational staff was reduced, but that was also tied to a service reduction, so there really should not have been an impact. That all having been said, of course, the Long Island Railroad looks very carefully at what's happening with overtime. We have a task force that meets every month to review in detail by department, title, function, what trends are we seeing, and what can we do to minimize overtime spending. In fact, part of our great success in 2010, when we dropped overtime by 12.6%, was due to targeting hiring in particular places where that hiring was funded to make sure we had gotten to the budgeted headcount to help us achieve that. But as you said, that's something we constantly look at. It's very important.
To what extent, if any, have you been able to focus on whether that overtime is being accumulated by people who are more senior and might seek to add overtime for pension purposes?
That is, our overtime task force looks at not just the titles and the functions and areas, it also looks at the high earners in each department, and we look to assess whether what flexibility the agency has. As you know, in many cases, how overtime is earned is governed by collective bargaining provisions, so there's a limitation to how much the department and the railroad can do in certain circumstances. But the extent we can, we do try to make the best of that situation.
To what extent, if any, the existing collective bargaining agreements such as to mandate overtime or to compel it for one reason or another when people become more senior so they can add it to their pensions?
I'm going to pause here. We probably should have an offline discussion. Long Island Railroad and several of our board members have heard, this issue for us. You referred to, minimum manning requirements. We do have one location that has a minimum manning requirement under an antiquated rule, Rule 24. We can, give you a briefing on that, Commissioner. It is an area in which employees will pick that location specifically at the end of their career because they have the opportunity for significant accumulation of overtime based on the minimum manning requirements.
It is an area, as you know better than I, that the media have placed a great deal of attention to that area. It seems to me that on balance, it is something that we have a responsibility to focus on, whether now or in negotiations.
It will be a key area in our collective bargaining negotiations, and we've included it in our preliminary discussions with our unions.
Thank you.
Because I think the point that he's making is that there's a difference between whether the overtime is necessary. The second issue is who gets the overtime if it was necessary. Those are two distinct issues, but they are to some degree related because of either labor rules or other issues. But we'll go further on that aspect.
Correct. Thank you.
Pat?
Yeah, Mitch, one brief point, just
Yep.
going to the chart on 45 that Charles referred to. I personally think that one of the things that drives commutation is the customer's experience and perception of delays. And while the chart goes through March, the delays that have experienced the Passover, first night of Passover, the delays in May, I think have a significant impact on people's perception about the reliability of service and affects their decision as to whether to run the railroad. So the agreement that's been struck with Amtrak, if that were to work, ought to help in the long term, but I think we should not overlook that as an effect, as a cause, rather.
And maybe send them the bill for lost ridership revenue, which might also be a very good idea.
That's called wishful thinking.
I understand that, but we can wish. Next, capital program.
Yes, our capital program report appears on page 55. I did want to highlight that we recently completed installation of new event recorders at 104 locations that will monitor the status of interlockings and highway grade crossings. These new event recorders will assist the railroad in the diagnosis of signal issues and reduce the time and costs associated with making those repairs. I will also note that event recorders are extremely important in accident reconstruction. We did have a very significant fatality on the railroad May 17th. It was a train panel truck collision. There are indications, and it's under investigation by MTA Police, that the operator of the panel truck went around down gates. The event recorder information is available to us. It indicates that the gates were operating properly. I do want to say that was, a very difficult incident, and the railroad's recovery of the scene was outstanding. I have to compliment all of the Long Island Railroad employees because it was a very large debris scene with the collision. And of course, there were customers that had to be removed from the train. Fortunately, it did get to a station, and we were able to unload customers at the station and then bus them from that location. It did not affect our PM, which is really a compliment to all the work that had to be done to restore the track and the third rail and the signal system. Finally, I want to mention in the capital program, Long Island Railroad's first mentoring project at Queens Village Station is scheduled to commence construction in June. We also have new elevators under design. That design will be scheduled for completion in June of this year, for construction to start in November 2011. The mentoring program is an opportunity to expand those companies that we do business with, offering an opportunity for minority business enterprises to get experience. And we're delighted that this is one of our first projects at Queens Village. Are there any questions on the capital program?
Information items?
There is one staff summary, and it is on weekend track work that we'll be doing in Port Washington, and it will allow us to do our own track rehabilitation, cleanup of the right-of-way, and track surfacing at Manhasset. If there are no questions, I'll keep going.
On that track rehabilitation the cleanup, I just want to thank you for including that in every future track work project. You know, that's been a sore point for Long Island Communities Council, the conditional right-of-way. I just want to mention between Port Washington and Hasset, the Communities Council brought this up to the railroad. There's been some, it seems like encroachments and other dumping near the right-of-way. I just want to make sure that this is, it's about a month in the future, that's taken care of if possible.
We have had incidents of illegal dumping in that area. We try to work with our police and local police, and we'll give you an update on that.
I mean, it's also issues of encroachment, I think.
Right.
The neighbors are really pushing the envelope.
Okay, and
Thank you.
we'll give you an update. Thank
Thanks.
you very much. And finally, in our work plan, we have our Maintenance of Equipment 2010 Annual Report, and it's on fleet maintenance. I am pleased to note that this is really the first full year that we're on the full reliability-centered maintenance program, moving away from life cycle maintenance. It's a tailored program that allows us to look at the specific subcomponents and the reliability of those components, and then make determinations about the maintenance that's required. I do want to pause for a moment and just note on the diesel fleet, which has been one of our more challenging issues on the Long Island Railroad. We did complete a review of what we need in terms of engine overhaul, and we used an outside consultant that helped us to evaluate the fleet miles. And at this point, because of the low fleet miles, although the age of the equipment would indicate we're at a 10-year overhaul, we're actually not at it because of the total miles. So we will be moving forward with additional work on an annual basis with the diesel locomotives as we develop a engine refurbishment program, and that's outlined on page 79. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Questions on the maintenance program? Ira?
Yes. Regarding the diesel fleet, I just wanted to note in the MDBF there's been some bright spots, and it seems that we're starting to approach the 18,000 for the 12-month average. That's a good sign. I'm concerned about going forward that we keep a keen eye on diesel performance because of they've been very troublesome. This equipment's has never performed up to where it should, and is still performing what I consider to be pretty low.
Right.
So I just wish we'd keep up on it. I don't know if what an overhaul would do or not do here. Probably the consultant, and you agree with, doesn't. It says here EMD change issue 109. It seems to be the only. I don't know what is that supposed to. An engine mods. Is that referencing something in the future that would increase we think would increase reliability? On page 79,
right.
there's a major active modifications. I just wonder if any of those actions we think would improve reliability.
I'll give you the background separately on the EMD change issue 109. That is recommended by the manufacturer. And one of the very good things I think we've done to enhance the reliability is re-engage the manufacturer to assist us.
I mean,
okay, and I think.
All right, anything else?
But do we think these things will increase the reliability over what it is currently, or are we just?
Our goal is to achieve the
18,000.
The 18,000 and maintain it. My sense is that we will not be able to grow that number.
Okay.
As the fleet ages.
I mean, with that, one last. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So we don't. So this is the way it's going to be, and we think we can probably maintain the 18,000 with these modifications, but we're not going to look for any improvement, and we're not going to do an overhaul either.
We are going to, in our plan of action, we're using the next 3 years to evaluate engine refurbishment, what we would need to do. But based on the low mileage that we've accumulated, we don't need to take any action right now.
Okay, and we don't think anything an overhaul would improve reliability?
Yeah.
Or we're just not...
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, well...
Yeah.
I get a lot of complaints.
I know. Yeah. No, the recommendation was that we would not see any great improvement.
Okay, all right.
Okay, number 5, we have an action item on page 82 relating to the implementation of the new MTA Safety and Security Committee and how that affects the charter of the Long Island Railroad Metro North Committee. If there are no questions, I would ask for a motion to approve so we can send it to Finance.
Move.
A second, all in favor? Okay. And I think that finishes Long Island Railroad for the moment. Howard?
Okay, good morning. I have two announcements, then we'll go into the agenda items. First, I wanted to let the board know that Metro North, we were very pleased that on Friday we received the MTA Chairman Outstanding Agency Achievement and Safety Award. So that was the second time we won in the last few years, so we're very proud of that. We'll have our cup. It's kind of like the Stanley Cup for the MTA, so we'll figure out where to show it. But so that's I just want to thank all the Metro North employees for the hard work, because that's really an agency-wide effort from the bottom up, led by Ann and by Bob Leblong here. But it's really everyone's involved to make that happen. So I was very pleased about that.
Congratulations.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Secondly, to let everyone know that on June 1st, we will be dipping our toe in the water on the quiet cars with New Jersey Transit. On that date, we'll be putting in quiet cars on the Port Jervis and Pascack Valley lines. It will be the easternmost car in both directions. It'll be following on the program New Jersey Transit has put in place for most of its system. This is the last part of the system that will be getting the quiet car. We and with Long Island will be monitoring it over the next 3 months, and then come fall we'll make a determination based on what we see. Do we want to expand that to parts of the systems for Metro North will be east of Hudson or parts of the Long Island Railroad system. So we'll know that, but we've given ourselves the summer to monitor it. We'll be doing a lot of surveys. We'll be in very close contact with New Jersey Transit to see how that goes.
It's been well received by New Jersey Transit, so I'm really pleased to see that we're giving it a shot.
Hopefully the same for us, we'll see.
Jim?
On an unrelated matter, but before you get started on the regular reports, last week the Metro North Commuter Council held a sort of a meet and greet in Grand Central where we solicited rider input and made our presence known, and found it to be a very useful and helpful outing. I did want to thank the railroad for enabling that in many ways. They gave us space. They gave us a banner, and as a result of their efforts and ours jointly, we were able to have a very good afternoon. So thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, so I think we're ready for status of operations, Bob.
Good morning, everyone. The status of operations starts on page 95 in your agenda book. In April, Metro North operated at 97.9%, which was above our goal of 97.8%. All three lines improved from the month of March. The Hudson line ran at 98.7%, the Harlem line ran at 98.5%, and the New Haven line ran at 97%. The AM peak overall was at 97.8%. The PM peak was 97.4%. There were only 2 days with OTP below 95%, and there were none below 90% during the month of April. Year to date, our on-time performance is now up to 96.2, which was a big improvement from our start in January and February. There were only 374 trains operated late out of 17,583 scheduled, and we had our second 100% day on Saturday, April the 23rd. Consist compliance for the month of April was at 99.3%. A significant improvement made on the New Haven line. The month of April, we're up to 98.6 as opposed to 97.7 in March. The Harlem and Hudson line compliance was excellent at both 99.8 and 99.9 respectively. In fact, the Hudson Line had only one train out of compliance out of the 4,286 that were operated. And the Harlem Line, this is 2 months in a row, was March and April, where AM peak compliance was at 100%. On the West of Hudson, the West of Hudson service operated at 96.9% in April, which was above our goal of 96.4%. 51 trains operated late out of 1,623. The Port Jervis Line operated at 92.9. This was below our goal of 95.5, predominantly due to the vandalism that took place in Otisville Tunnel. We had 2 bad days on the Port Jervis Line. We ran at 42% and 38% respectively on those 2 days. The Pascack Valley Line...
Bob, just explain that was what happened in the tunnel for a minute.
That was a 27-conductor cable that was stolen by vandals. I think they went in with the ATVs. I'm not sure where the police investigation, whether it's completed. I believe they went in and pulled it out, and it basically took out our signals from CPOV all the way up through Port Jervis. So we were actually operating without signals, so it delayed just about every train that went through the area in that particular spot.
Bob?
Yes?
I think it's important to point out that you were doing terrific with on-time performance. And
well, yeah, actually, with those 2 days, we would have ran 97% on the...
it would have been wonderful. So
Jervis line.
it just goes to show what a nitwit can do when they get in your tunnel.
The Pascack Valley for that month actually ran at 99.7%. We only had 3 late trains on the Pascack Valley for the entire month of April, which is 951 trains scheduled. Okay, and the MDBF, that's outlined on page 99 in your agenda book. The MDBF for the month of March was 95,307, still below our goal of 127,000. Year-to-date, we are now up to 66,962. We're still suffering from the effects of the January and February with the Red Fleet. The Red Fleet also carried over actually into the month of March. We only ran at 39,266 for the 2s, 4s, and 6s. On the H&H, the blue equipment, the EMUs were above goal at 712,641. The diesel service was also above goal at 236,000. On a brighter note, the New Haven Line EMU performance has returned to normal levels so far in the month of April. We should be able to get close to our goal and expect to be, for the month anyway, above our MDBF goal for the month of April. And that is the operations report.
Any questions? Charles?
First, I'd like to congratulate Howard and Metro North for their activity in terms of cleaning up the dumping. Well done.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to call your attention to page 101 and back to the issue of standees. There are a total of 417 standees this year to date, with the overwhelming bulk of those on the New Haven line. And my question is, what, if anything, can we do, if anything, to relieve that?
Okay, so let me just. So the vast majority of that was last. If you look at the numbers, you see it's a very low number in April. The vast majority was during the winter when we had so much of our fleet out of service. And so during those days in January, if you recall, we had upwards of half the fleet out of service. We had significant standees in January, then less so, but still significant in February into March. So what you're seeing here, this is, I believe, an average for the average month, right? This is the daily average. It's a daily average year to date. So until we work through, because as Bob mentioned, we now have enough cars, we're able to fill out the trains every day, so there will be no program standees. It'll take a while on a year-to-date basis to bring that number down.
Okay.
Could I add something to this? The difficulties that we had over the winter on the New Haven line were somewhat related to the fact that that's the oldest of the fleets that are being operated. And I think it's a good thing for us to think about as we face the end of funding for the capital program. If we don't maintain our equipment in state of good repair, we're not able to provide the kind of service that our customers have come to look for. It's very important for us to keep that in mind going forward as we deal with the capital plan.
But isn't part of the response or rejoinder to that we have an obligation to make clear to the elected representatives in the various jurisdictions that they too have a responsibility to either play or get away from the piano, either to provide the funds to do the job, and I recognize fully the governor is doing those things he can to finally get this budget under control, or two, risk the ire of the electorate.
Well, in this case, on this line, it's the wrong governor. It's not the governor of New York, it's the governor of Connecticut, who refused for many years, the state of Connecticut for many years refused to fund the necessary additional purchases of new cars, and as a result of that, the old cars had to be used longer than they were originally designed to be used, and as a result of that, what happened in the winter happened in the winter. So
capital program runs across.
And the lucky thing probably for the governor of Connecticut at that point is she decided not to run any longer. Now, whether there's a direct connection between the two, I don't know, but she was not there in January and February to take the ire because she had already left office.
Well, that said, I agree with Chuck's comment that it is the responsibility of our elected officials to understand the importance of the capital plan, and it is our responsibility to see that we make it clear what that capital plan entails and what the costs are to our service, which I know this committee has been in the process of doing.
Forgive me, isn't it true that at the end of the day, the fare box cannot, without outrageous increases in fares across the board, support the kind of infrastructure needs that exist within the entire system, and that the only way in which the system can be maintained and improved is if government as a whole, whether it be New York, New Jersey, no, forget New Jersey, in more ways than one, New York and Connecticut, do those kind of things that they can. And while I have no problem with the fact that there are many within those jurisdictions who are doing what they can, it is something that we need to make clear to the public.
Yes, but I have to say that at least west of Hudson really does appreciate New Jersey very much since they operate our trains.
Okay, next.
I would just add one other thing that, Chuck, that we should acknowledge the loyalty under adverse circumstances of our Connecticut riders, who, as Bob will point out in his upcoming report, continue to increase in terms of numbers and dollars, and our great support to the railroad.
All right, the safety report will be given by Ann Kirsch.
Thank you. Good morning. I'll be summarizing the statistics through March, which will be found beginning on page 100 in your books. Total employee injuries, we're seeing 50% over last year, year-to-date through March at this point. Reportable injuries, FRA reportable injuries, 43% over last year, and total customer injuries are 119% over last year. 84% of those customer injuries were all related to slip, trip, and fall. We are seeing, though, that although the comparisons are still high, we're seeing a downward trend now through April, with April being 35% over last year. Because of the high numbers, we've been doing some safety stand-downs to try and refocus the employees and get them to understand the importance of their day-to-day activities. And we're using peer-to-peer influence with our local safety committees, and we're seeing that now affecting the numbers through April and May. So we'll continue that. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy.
Let me just add to that. Part of what we're seeing is the effects of the winter. We had a significant number of injuries with a really bad weather through the first 3 months of the year. So as Ann's saying, we're starting to see, starting in March and again in April, the numbers are starting to come down and stabilize. But again, the year-to-date numbers will have that impact in them for basically the whole year because of the months of January and February.
Questions on safety, financial and ridership?
Good morning. Financial report for March begins on page 106. And let me just begin by mentioning that the summary comment refers to the month of February. That's pretty much because it was carried over from last month. The message we wanted to keep is clear and consistent. The net accrued deficit and the net cash deficit continue to be significantly positive against budget due to lower operating as well as capital program activity. Just the wording of the month was kind of missed there. There's a lot of details in our report here, so I'm just going to provide some highlights. If you turn to page 107 and 108, you'll see that the accrued net deficit for the month of March was $60.7 million, which is $1.8 million or 3% favorable against the budget. That makes year-to-date March net deficit of $173 million and $10.5 million or 6% favorable to the budget. This still reflects only 3 months of activity, and certainly a delay in processing of a delay and timing of activity, as well as some deferred capital program work due to the continuing winter weather and winter emergencies that we experienced. If you turn to page 112, onto the cash net deficit, I will say that the month of March was the first time that I was pleased to see overspending against the budget. What this reflects is just a catch-up of significant cash payments being processed. So it reflects more than just the month of March. So it will have some, December activity, January and February as well. So that made the March net cash deficit of $46.4 million and $4.8 million, or 12% negative to the budget. However, our year-to-date cash deficit of $76.3 million continues to be favorable against the budget by $34 million or 31%. That gap is just being bridged and just, being reduced at this point in the year. We saw a huge catch-up in MTA capital reimbursements being paid to Metro North. We also saw significant catch-up in health and welfare night shift payments, as well as maintenance and other operating contract payments for things such as utilities and rents, and New Jersey Transit payments for the services that they provide to Metro North. We do want to mention that we expect the payments and delays to continue to be caught up as the year progresses, and at one point to get to a more regular variance level. On page 116, there's a recap on combined non-reimbursable and reimbursable overtime. On there, you'll see that for the month of March, we were negative to the budget by $300,000. About $200,000 of that relates to an event that happened on March 6th, which you recall, and you've seen pictures of it. It was the heavy rains that resulted in Danbury line washout that required a significant emergency response and repair work. Some of the other negative variances relates to vacancy and absenteeism coverage. I will say that on a daily basis, as there's absenteeism, there are decisions being made by the supervisors out in the field on whether or not to cover that absenteeism based on overtime and at the rate and the level of coverage, half a shift or the entire shift. So we'll continue to monitor whether or not, that's just a timing in terms of the month of March being slightly negative to the budget. However, year to date, all other categories of overtime, with the exception of emergency response, is favorable to the budget. Page 122, the FOR for year-to-date March is 56.1%, which is 2.1% favorable to the budget, once again, mainly due to lower expenditure spending. Cost per passenger is $12.75 year-to-date, and you'll see slightly less favorable variances for the month of March, but that was due to the catch-up in the timing of payments, and the year-to-date figures are positive and favorable to the budget. March ridership recap, just that the month of March was slightly less than 1% higher than the budget and 1.9% higher than March 2010. And Bob will cover the month of April, and I can respond to any questions at that time.
Good morning. The March ridership report is in your book starting on page 123. You were emailed out late last week. The preliminary April numbers, I'll just summarize them. Rail ridership in the month of April was up 1.9%. We saw good growth in both commutation, which was up 1.3, and non-commutation rail ridership was up 2.8. Overall ridership in the month of April system-wide grew 1.8%, totaling 6.844 million. Year-to-date, ridership is up about 1.5% across the board. Rail commutation, rail non-commutation, and total system are all up about 1.5% year-to-date for 4 months. Any questions?
Duck?
Let me address the last area first. I notice under ridership that the Harlem line has a negative variance in terms of ridership and of fare box revenue, which probably go hand in hand. My question is there anything that you can point to that would explain that, or what we are doing to address that? You'll find that statistic on page 121.
121. Yeah.
See it?
No. Do you want to talk
Well,
about
I see,
the
yeah.
revenue?
It's you're looking at, let me just look at this. Year-to-date, you're looking at March or year-to-date?
I'm looking at now the variance on page 121. Fare box revenue Harlem line is down, unfavorable, 0.027.
Right.
And then on the ridership, the same issue. Now, it's minimal, but the
Right.
question is, what are we doing where that doesn't show up on either of the other lines?
Bob, do you want to speak to that?
That's, I'll say first, that's versus budget, not versus 2010. And the first January and February, one of the things we saw was a lot of really bad weather that affected, in particular, our non-commutation ridership, not our commutation ridership. The impact varied by line.
And you see, New Haven, which had the most significant adverse impact, was not down during that period.
So I think part of Bob said a very important thing. It's based on the budget. So to the extent to which we have to look at this, go back to compare these numbers to last year is the best estimate, of what's happening on the line. But in large part, and these are very small numbers, I would suggest that it's largely a function that we may have misestimated slightly. One of these small numbers in terms of what we thought the ridership or revenue would be.
Most likely, the effect is the calendarization of the budget on a month-by-month basis. For both January and February, I did recall that the fare box revenue and ridership was positive on all three lines. And although there's a slightly negative for the month of March, it's more likely calendarization.
Is it possible
And the
that
busted
this
estimation.
is the Botanical Garden Station causing the problem?
No, it's not enough people there that would drive these numbers.
All right. Let me ask again the same question I put earlier concerning overtime. Is there any basis for these kind of increases on absenteeism grounds? And if so, if it's absenteeism, what is it we're doing to deal with that subject?
So we have which page are you on, Charles?
Well, I'll give you the series. They are 109, 113, 115, and 116, showing the overtime having increased. On page 109, it's due to the Danbury branch washout, but also for other reasons. Then on 115, the state, you have those numbers again of it being down, and on page 117, it's vacancy coverage.
Yeah, so let me just address the biggest driver of overtime has been the issue of the weather. So the first part was, as I mentioned, we had half the fleet out of service. We worked overtime. We worked 24/7 in the shops on the New Haven line well into April to get that back. So that was planned overtime that we knew we needed to do to bring the fleet back. The second piece that was into March was, as Kim mentioned, was that washout, which we worked, again, we worked around the clock for about 10 days till we brought the washout back. The rest of the overtime, based on and Kim, you jump in if to add to this, is we're basically under budget everywhere else. So what's driving our numbers at Metro North are really that one emergency plus the issue on the New Haven line we had for about 3.5 months.
But am I correct then that absenteeism is not necessarily a major factor driving the overtime?
Kim, do you want to address that?
I had that suggestion a minute ago.
Well, there are 17,000 hours of absenteeism budgeted for overtime. So it is and that includes vacation, sick time, as well as vacancy coverages. So it is there is a significant part of the overtime budget. However, it is not a significant driver of the negative variance against the budget. There was only a slight 3,000 hours that was overspending in the month of March. However, on a year-to-date basis, we are positive by almost 4,000 hours or $200,000. So as I mentioned, coverage for vacancies and vacation and sick is determined on a day-to-day basis, and there are controls and oversight to ensure that overtime that is provided is necessary, and what level of it must be provided.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe we could ask if both railroads could put together a delineation of the overtime issue for the next month in relation to the absenteeism and the other issues that are there, so that we can get a better idea about where things are at the moment. I would ask both railroads if they could put that together for us. Thank you. Capital Program, 133.
Yes, good morning. The capital program report begins on page 133. And a real brief update. I'd like to report that the north end of the Track 3 platform at Tarrytown Station was opened up to passengers last week. We've got some temporary handrails and lighting, but opening that up to its full length is going to be a great improvement for the customers. Also at Tarrytown, you'll see that the structural steel for the north overpass is being erected, so we're going to see a lot of improvements and progress in Tarrytown over the next several months. That job will complete next spring. And up in Poughkeepsie, the monumental windows at the beautiful Poughkeepsie Station have been installed. Excuse me. They look great. It's really bringing the station around quite a bit, and that project will be completed sometime this summer. And if anyone has any questions.
Any questions on capital? Okay.
We have
Schedule changes.
Sure. We have two reports. Let me do them quickly. One is the schedule change east of Hudson on June 27th. This is a no-cost change, and it does include some additional express service on the Hudson line we can do because of by using some deadhead trains now in revenue service. So there will be some more upper Hudson line service. Secondly, the report on the MOV annual report on fleet maintenance. Let me just bring to your attention a couple of things. I mean, this has been the focus on maintenance and the fleet side has been a major one for Metro North during the year. A couple of achievements from last year to highlight is we've made major improvements in MDBF and in conscious compliance, which we report every month. There's been a lot of interagency activity. We've been able to have both Long Island Railroad and New York City Transit do significant amounts of work for us on our fleets. And we've also been able to do a good job in saving money in terms of inventory, buying less and buying much more smartly. Looking forward into the next year, We will continue to look at expanding interagency activities, continue to bring down the cost of materials between the procurement department and the M&V department. We will be looking at what the future is at Harmon. As you know, that still remains a major problem for us in the old facility. We'll continue to work with Connecticut to bring on an adequate facility in New Haven, which we don't have. We will also be dealing with the issue of people attrition. As we get closer to 2013, that becomes a bigger and bigger issue for Metro North, and so we have a number of programs in place to try to provide some succession planning within the mechanical department.
Any questions on the fleet maintenance report? If not, MTA Police.
Good morning. System-wide, we were up again in April, 38 versus 24, an increase of 14 incidents. We saw an increase in assaults, 10 versus 2, and larcenies, 23 versus 13. As noted here, we've been struggling with robberies all year. However, in April, we were down. We had 4 incidents versus 7 last year. Those 10 assaults, we did have 10 arrests. 9 of those assaults were either on police officers or train crew personnel, and anytime train crew or police officers assaulted, it automatically is elevated to a felony. And we had 1 incident where an individual was assaulted with a bottle. So 5 of those assaults were committed on MTA police officers, again while they were effecting arrest. 2 were off-duty officers, and 2 assaults were committed against conductors. Again, each case was closed by an arrest. The larcenies, 23 versus 13, very spread out throughout the system. 6 from yards, 5 from individuals. 3 were on trains. 2 of those, the individuals were asleep. We had 2 copper thefts. 1 was noted earlier in Otisville. That is still open. We did have an arrest in Croton on a copper theft. We had 3 incidents in stations or terminals, 1 credit card incident, ticket fraud, and 1 case we're investigating. We believe it was a falsely reported incident. If anybody has any questions.
Any questions on the police report? And Helena and I were both honored to be at the opening of the new Central Islip MTPD station, which will provide great security and service to our commuters from Suffolk County. I thank you for all your help on that.
Well, I thank you both for everything out there.
Not a problem. East Side Access, Michael.
In order to save some time, I will basically focus on what changes occurred since last time I reported. The good news, the fact that in Queens, the soft ground tunneling started, and we have actually punched through about 20 feet, the first 20 feet. So keep our fingers crossed to see how we're going forward. So that's the part that is actually new from last time. In Manhattan, the concrete placement continues in both tail tracks and running tunnels, yet in Manhattan we are experiencing some schedule setbacks and are primarily due to, at this point, some mechanical issues, yet we are looking and exploring mitigation measures to try to see what we can do to mitigate the problems that we have seen. In Queens, the tunnel that we are digging under Northern Boulevard has experienced delays, and they're not on the critical path, but yet the delays were there. And some of the major issues related to delays are the previously installed slurry walls for the contract that we defaulted. We found additional problems as we moved along. So at this point, there were additional delays in that respect. While the budget continues to be, we are on budget. There are, again, pressures on that, but at this point, we are still on budget. I'm just going to try to, as I said, make it brief, and that's the changes that we have seen.
Any questions on East Side Access?
Excuse me?
Did that do anything to the time as well? I know you said it was still on budget, but
as I said, we are experiencing problems in Manhattan that this is on a critical path. and we're looking at how to mitigate these problems. At this point, we are still staying with the same schedule and budget that we have.
Still September 16.
Still September.
Still
16.
September 16. That's the most important part of the report.
Okay.
Still September 16. Procurements, Metro North,
Okay.
page 174.
Okay, we have two of
173
them
and 74.
for approval this month, about $140,000. One competitive to Cecil Group, which will be, we got funding from FHWA. This is to do a TOD project with the city of Poughkeepsie. And then one ratification for some equipment we needed for the BL-20s, our locomotives, during the wintertime when we're having significant problems. So
Any
that's
questions
the
on
approval.
the Metro North procurements? Motion to approve? Second, all in favor? Aye. Capital Construction, page 174.
Capital.
Is David there? Yeah, okay.
Capital construction this month has a total of 4 procurement items, all of which are competitive, and a total $7,177,000. The first item is a modification for the East Side Access General Engineering Consultant contract totaling $5.48 million to advance the preliminary design for the future East Side Access Midday Storage Yard facility to 100% complete design. The second item is a modification to the East Side Access Harold Structures Part 1 contract totaling $872,000 for revisions to the installation of a 12 kV duct bank and associated manholes. The third and fourth items are similar items. They are modifications for the East Side Access Manhattan Tunnels excavation contract and the Manhattan Structures Part 1 contract. Both the work requires corrosion control, installation of corrosion controls systems for the concrete flat invert that were installed under previous modifications. The total for contract, the East Side Access Manhattan excavation contract, is $448,000, and for the Manhattan Structures Part 1 contract is $355,000.
Questions, Charles?
176, the Perini contract. Was the original design done in-house or by an outside contractor? The one that was rejected by Abstract?
It was done by the General Engineering Consultants. That means outside.
Outside?
Yeah.
Is there any possibility of chargeback since it was rejected?
We are on every project, in effect, if you notice, we have an error and omission analysis being performed. We have a number of them. We have a protocol that we are following, and be glad to share it with you at any time. But there is a protocol that we're following to make sure that we are looking at any errors and omission that we can charge it back. Just so you understand, this is actually a little more complicated because our umbrella insurance covers also, in this particular case, a professional liability, and that's a process that, in effect, they have to, the designer will then have to deal with the professional liability. We can recover the money directly from the professional liability, and then the designer has to in fact...
you file the first claim? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
And has that been filed here?
We are following, we have a number of them. This is just, we start, there is a process. It's
Good.
just not instantaneous, unfortunately. We don't have instant gratification there. Lawyers are involved, Chuck.
Any other questions on the 4 East Capital Construction? Motion to approve? Second, all in favor?
Maybe in a future meeting, you can give us an update on how that filing is going.
Okay.
On all of them?
All 93 of them?
All 93 of them,
Okay.
wherever they are.
Okay.
Any other motion? Charles, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I assume we all received this analysis of proposed changes to fare box ratios and the
Yes, well, that I asked that report was done at my request and Jim Sidor's. It has been done by Bob Ferran of CFO. I asked that it be distributed to all the board members for review. I did not want to have that this month because Jim is not here.
That's good.
So we will do it next month. If anybody has any questions about it,
I have only one question. Is it possible to keep both areas of information without rejecting one, as is
That is
proposed?
possible. That's one of my questions. If anyone has, any of the board members have questions, if they could get them to either myself or Jim, so that we could get them to Bob directly, and we will go from there. But that will be discussed at next month. As I said, I didn't want to do that this month because
No
Jim was
problem.
not here. Motion to adjourn? Thank you all very much.